Hey tubers, it's Ben the Curious Consumer and welcome back to the channel. Controllers, tournament style controllers or elite controllers. You guys know that's the name of my game. I love modifying my controllers. Today I'm going to teach you how to, on a PlayStation 4 controller, how to modify your controller and give you some of the basic functionalities that you get on some of those big name brand controllers. But we're going to do it at a fraction of the price. We're going to be talking about a kit that costs $32.99 at the time of recording this video. And I'll leave links in the description below to guide you toward that product later on. It is a product made by Extreme Rate. It is called the Ps4 Controller Dawn 2.0 FlashShot Trigger Stop Remap Kit. It is a mouthful, and I literally had to look at the box in order to say it to you guys because that title is crazy long. I am going to simply refer to it during this entire video as the 2.0 kit, all right? We'll make that deal. It is a Remap 2.0 kit that allows you to remap your functionality buttons on the controller and give you trigger stops so the triggers will be a little quicker for you in tournament style play, just like you would get on an Xbox One Elite controller or just like you would get on something like a SCUF controller. So this kit is usable for certain types of PlayStation controllers. It is actually compatible with the JDM 40, 50, and 55 controllers. If you don't know how to tell what that is, typically it's a little stamp on the motherboard on the inside of the controller, but there is an easier way to find out whether or not your controller is compatible. Let's take a look. As you can see here, I've got a bunch of different controllers on the table, and I mainly want to talk about these two because these two are the non-modded controllers. So this is a original PlayStation 4 controller, and this one here is a PlayStation 4 either 40, 50, or 55, JDM 40, 50, or 55. In the very beginning of the PlayStation 4's life cycle, the controllers were made with black buttons. So if you take a look at the buttons here, they're black. The triangle, the circle, the X, or the square on top of that. The directional pad is black. The thumbsticks are black. But if you take a look at some of the newer, or well, all of the newer controllers for PlayStation 4, they're gray. So the buttons are gray. The thumbsticks are gray. The options and share button are gray. The PlayStation button in the center is gray, and the directional pad is gray. So it's definitely easy to tell if you buy a new one without having to turn on the controller. If it's got gray buttons, it typically is a JDM 40, 50, or 55. Another way to tell is when you turn on the controller, the light bar will show on the top here, where on the originals it did not do that. But instead of turning on your PlayStation 4 controller or turning on your PlayStation 4, just to find out, this is an easier way to tell. So we are going to modify this controller today with the Dawn Remap Kit 2.0 as opposed to the 1.0 kit that I've done in the past. Now I'll leave links up in the top here so you can see on the card the original installation of this. And essentially this one here does the same thing. It remaps the face buttons to be extra buttons on the back of the controller. So when you actually have your fingers on the back, you can click these buttons and it might be remapped to a button on the face here. Now, there are two ways to do this modification. You could either solder it or not solder it. Today, I'm going to go through the soldering process. You don't have to do it. You still get a majority of the functionality if you decide not to solder the controller. But if you do solder it, it gives you full functionality. Now, what do you lose by not soldering the controller is you don't get the functionality to remap the L3, R3, or the touchpad button. When you solder the controller, you have that functionality to add to remapping to one of the buttons on the back. Now, the difference between the 1.0 version and the 2.0 version is the fact that the 1.0 version gave you 4 of the buttons on the back with no trigger stops. The 2.0 version gives you 2 buttons on the back as opposed to the 4 and the trigger stops to give you a shorter pull. And we'll see what that looks like in just a moment. So we're going to move these controllers off the side and we are going to take a look and see what's inside this box. Right away, when you open it up, you are greeted with this, the Holy Grail. It is the instruction manual, if you will. It is the instruction manual, fully colored, very detailed instruction manual that they give you. So if you're not watching this video when you're putting it together, the instruction manual does a very good job as well, showing you step by step what you need to do, what tools are needed, and where to place the components in order for it to work. So definitely don't lose this. It's definitely good for reference. We'll leave that aside. Right here is the backing. So let's see what I did. I chose the blue backing because I wanted to definitely differentiate my controller. I like my controllers to look a little different. I don't really like to stick with the norm. So I decided to go with something like this. You'll see it's a little different than a regular backing of a PlayStation 4 controller. It's got these extra holes here for the buttons, these holes here for the trigger stops, and I've got this nice blue textured grip on the back. I like it a lot. There is another hole here you'll notice in the middle, and that is for the LED indicator that tells you specifically if your controller's on or off based on the programming mode right there. So we are going to be doing this. We're going to be transferring the components from the other controller and putting them in here. You'll get a 1-year warranty card here, which we don't need right now. You will also get your main components. This is the main board with the buttons, if I can get into the bag. It is the main board with the buttons and the wires, as well as the touchpad that goes on inside the controller that allows you to turn the controller functionality on and off. So you'll see here's the board. Here are the buttons left and right, your touchpad, and of course 2 extra wires, which you could cut off. They recommend you cutting them off if you're not going to solder them. So we'll get into that when we get to that part. But this is the brains of the component here, the brains of the whole thing. And everything is labeled right down here like L3, R3. That's where those would actually be sent to. So I'm going to put that aside, brains of the operation. You will also get the ribbon cable that goes inside of the controller that bypasses the original ribbon cable. So we're going to put that aside. It also includes the tools here. You'll get a spudger inside, a Phillips head screwdriver, small. You'll get the springs for the trigger stops as well as a bunch of screws in here. Now, I'm glad they include the toolkit, but I find in my experience, I like using my own tools. So I will not be using these, but definitely keep them for future projects or use them. They're definitely usable. And of course, lastly, you're going to get the plastic pieces, which are going to be the components for the trigger stops, as well as giving you 2 options, which you can see on the front of the box as well. 2 different options for the buttons on the back, an angular version or a circular version. So they give you those options there. So we're going to just take this box off the table, put it aside, and we're going to put aside all of these parts because first things first, we have to take apart our existing controller. Now, what I recommend when you're doing this, get the tools that you like to use. And I always use something like this, a little ice tray for all the loose parts and components. So that's what I use to put my screws in there. And I put them in order specifically so I can remember what order to put them back in. So I'm going to put this ice tray off to the side here, and I'm going to use that when I put my screws in there. So let's get started. Let's take apart this controller step by step. We're going to start by removing the 4 screws on the back. All right, once you get those screws out, what I recommend is starting down in this area here and just pulling back a little bit. You can see that my controller comes apart. This was a refurb controller that I fixed in the past, so it comes off pretty easily, but typically it'll be a little tighter here. So when you pull it off, there's 2 clips here. This is where you'd use your spudger. You could slide your spudger right underneath and pull the clips off here and here. And then, of course, there's other clips up towards the top here. So when you pull it back, you slide the spudger up, and it will separate the plastic pieces. In this case, I am just going to pull it off like so. And be careful because there is a ribbon cable on the inside here. You don't want that ribbon cable to be pulled too tight. So all you're going to do is pull that off with your fingers, and you can set this piece aside because you're going to use the internal components to that piece later on. So you're going to need to take out the USB charging port, the light, and then, of course, the plastic pieces, which we'll get into in just a moment. Before I do that, though, what I always do when I'm doing a fix on this, I don't want these controllers to turn on my PlayStation, so I'm going to disconnect the battery. And how to do that is very simple. You're just going to pull on the battery just to get it off the little sticky pad here, pull it around the little connector, and you're going to wiggle off the connector here, so it's not going to power the controller. Now, Your controller may look a little different. This piece may be on this side and the connector will be on that side, but relatively the same as long as you've got the JDM 40, 50, or 55. So I'm going to put this piece aside because I want to start with the backing first. I would like to take out the components that are on the back side here and just put them on this side here. All right, so we'll start with taking off this little rubber piece and put that aside. It's just a little sticker, so you can put that right aside there. And then when you're taking apart this piece here, you just want to be very careful. This is the side that lifts up. So this side is the side that lifts up. This side here pivots on that piece of plastic. So don't start pulling from this side. Always start from this side. You could use your finger, just as easy as I did, push against the plastic and pull it up. Put that aside. Or you could use like a little flathead screwdriver or your spudger just to kind of get it started here. You're going to take out that little plastic piece as well, and this frosted piece, because that's going to go into the other side. And then all you're going to do is remove the one screw that is located right here. And we're going to be using that right away, but first we got to take out this board. You could do it with your fingers or with a spudger, but you want to be careful because right here where the charger is, the plastic is around the metal piece. So you kind of want to lift and pull back at the same time. Once you get it lifted with your fingers like that, you can just pull back this way and make sure not to bend or break anything inside here. So this we could disregard. We can put that aside. Now what I want to do is reinstall this piece right back in here. And all I'm going to do is the opposite. I'm just going to tuck it in this part first and then lay it down. Make sure it lines up, push it in, and lay it down. Once that's down, I'm going to replace that screw, which is still on my screwdriver. Screw it into place. That looks good. It is now in there. And then we're going to replace everything the same way that we did it just a second ago, starting with the frosted piece. And remember, you're going to put this end in first. This end goes first. So the left side, if you're looking at it like I am, and you're just going to push down the right side. It's going to clip into place, and that's it. So now that part is pretty much done. All we'll have to do now is put in the trigger pieces and then put in the buttons. Okay, so now that we've gotten the back on, I went into the bags and I took out the plastic pieces that we needed. It looks like they give you doubles of everything in here. The buttons, the trigger stops, everything. So just in case you break something, don't fret. They give you double of everything. So we're going to, I selected the pieces out that I needed. I'm going to put aside the other ones for later on. But right now, you are going to need the springs. You're going to need 2 springs. You're going to need these parts that look just like this. And I don't know if you can tell here, but right on this portion, right underneath, not the button itself, but right underneath here, it gives you a letter, an R or an L. I don't know if you can see that, but it does give you an R or an L, indicating which side this is going to go on, right or left. And so all you're going to do when you do this, I'm going to start with the right side, is you're just going to lay it in place. Just push it down like that. You're just going to set it in place. So once you have it like this, you're going to put your spring on top, the smaller side of the spring towards the bottom, and the fatter side towards the top. And then you're going to have pieces that look just like this. And you're going to notice there is a little guide here for the sliding part. That part's got to go face down. And then you're going to screw the 3 screws in right on the controller here. So I'm just going to put it on top. I'm going to get my screws out, which are inside the bag that had the spudger and screwdriver. So let's get a bunch of screws out here. Just put them in front of us here so we can work on screwing this into place. All right, so now that we got those trigger stops in place, it was just 3 screws again. 1, 2, 3. You put the spring with the fat side facing up. You put in those 2 plastic pieces, and here you go. You just flick up and flip down. Flip up, flip down. And now that's going to have it so when you pull the triggers, it's going to stop about halfway. So that way you get a quicker trigger pull when you're playing games. All right, so for now, we're going to stop because we are going to have to put the buttons on the back, but I want to get everything done on the front first. So let's go and jump into doing the front portion of the controller. So in this case here, there's a screw here and there's a ribbon cable here that you've got to take off. So let's take those out. Fingers like mine, I've got some chubby fingers. Getting it in here is kind of tough, but if you can't get your fingers in there, just a pair of tweezers might work okay for you. Now that's going to be the part that's going to give us the hard time getting it back on. So let's put that aside and let's get to the board here. Now I'm not going to desolder the rumble motors here, but what I am going to do is flip the board over, and there's 2 little clips on the side here. So as I mentioned before, this is the connector, or this is the controller portion, and that is the membrane here on the front. You can see that blue part, that's the membrane. And the membrane is connected by this piece here. And so what we're going to be doing is bypassing the membrane with this by putting this in between the 2. Okay. Now, recommendations, if you've got double-sided tape, you could put a piece of double-sided tape right here. However, it is not included with the kit. If you're going to solder, I'm going to show you where to solder that. That'll hold it in place pretty much. You just want to slowly flip it back over onto the other side, or you can just take this and lay it in here first before flipping the board back over. So let's get to the soldering portion, and I'll show you what you need to do to solder this piece to the board in order to control the center touchpad button. Okay. So as you can see here, this is the ribbon cable that is going to be bypassing the controller. And you'll see that there's a bunch of little golden pads all through here. And then there's another golden pad right here on the edge. So that golden pad on the edge is what's going to be soldered to one of the legs on the button here. So it's going to be to that corner. So while I don't think I'm going to use the touchpad button for remappable buttons, I'm going to actually bypass that. So while I have the board flipped over, all I'm going to do is take the ribbon cable, put it in place like this on the little tabs. There's 2 little tabs in there. And then I'm going to connect the front to the back again. So if you have double-sided tape, it works a lot better than trying to do it like this, but I don't have double-sided tape right now, so I am just going to piece it together like this. And once it goes on and in place, then your ribbon cable is ready to go. It's not going to necessarily really move there, but you want to be somewhat light with it when you move it around. If you have any issues with this later on, where a button isn't working or maybe a button is acting up, take it back apart and you could actually just move that ribbon cable a little bit and it'll probably make it work again. So what I usually do is bend this little wire back just a little bit. Just be careful with it just so it goes straight up, because what ends up happening is it's very, very finicky when you try to put this front piece back on. It doesn't necessarily always go through the right way, so you end up fighting with that little wire. And I don't really feel like fighting with it right now. So there it is. Once you fight that little cable through, now you can reattach it. Once that's back in, so I'm going to put my screw back in. That way the board stays in and it doesn't wiggle off. As for the wire orientation for this component, the red is for right and the blue is for left. This controller here, you're going to see there's about 14 of these little solder points here. So where we're going to be connecting the wires to is this set of 4 here. We're going to set it right on this one for the right and this one for the left. I'm going to put a little bit of flux on each side just to get the solder flowing. What I recommend doing when you're soldering first is you want to connect this board to that ribbon cable so you know the orientation of where this is going to be in the controller deck itself. So, or in the base of the controller deck. So you want to flip open this little tab here so it's ready to accept the ribbon cable. And you're just going to slide the ribbon cable into place. Obviously the gold sides are going to be going down onto the board here. Once you slide it into place, make sure it's in as tight as you can get it, and then flip that down. So this is the orientation that it's going to be when you put it into the back of the controller case. So I'm just going to flip that back over and start connecting my wires here. All right, so we're going to be going for that one right there. So let's get our little wire in place. And solder it to the board. There it is. So that one's all set to go. Again, I'm going to put a little bit of solder on the tip here so it'll easily work on the next one. All right, so now we're done with our soldering. Okay, so now that we've got that in place, now we have to put this board into the backing that we just finished a little while ago. The way you're going to orient your buttons is your wires are going to face in. So I'm going to start with the right side here, and all I'm going to do is slide the button into place like this. So now it's in place. I'm going to take my HK1 and I'm going to put it in place as well, holding it down, and then I'm going to screw it down. All right, so now the buttons are in place. Now all we've got to do is put this board down here. What I like about what they're doing with the board this time is there's a screw that holds it into place. And again, that's that short little screw here. But the only issue you're going to have is where are you going to be putting this touchpad? This touchpad it does have double-sided tape on it, and you have to tape it down to the bottom of the back piece here. Okay, so once you get that sticker off here, I'm going to use some pliers because I can't do this with my fingers. My fingers are too fat. And what you want to do with this button here is place it somewhere on the bottom that doesn't cover up the hole that's located right here, because that hole is a very important indicator. This is the screw hole that's going to hold the board down. Just underneath that is the indicator light. That little indicator light is going to tell you when the controller is activated in program mode. And once you get it in there, you want to put some pressure on that sticker so that there's no bubbles or anything coming off. So at least you know it's making its proper connection. And then you're going to take your board and you're going to screw that into place. So now that we've got that in and screwed down, I'm going to put my battery cover back on. I've already plugged my battery in. Just note, one thing to note, that some of these battery covers have to be screwed in. So I screwed this in to hold it in place prior to me putting all this together, but I did have to unscrew it to put the battery cover back on so this sits flush. So just know that going into it, that you may have to unscrew it if that's what you did. I did it for convenience purposes to make sure that the other ribbon cable didn't get pulled back out. So now I'm going to screw this down. It's going to help hold everything together nice and tight. I could flip my battery over. And now you just want to be very careful reconnecting your other wires here. So I have to put this cable back. I have to put this cable back in, plug this cable back in, which I'll do right now. And it's always hard to do this part and show it on camera at the same time. All right, once that's in there, this ribbon cable is going to be very in the way. So what you want to do is kind of just nice and easily push this into place while pushing that ribbon cable back so everything goes back together. And once you get it where you feel that it feels good, what I recommend is start by the top and work your way to the bottom. Now that's in place, and I just got to replace my screws here to hold the controller together, and we will be all done. Do I want the angular buttons or the circular ones? And I think, because I did angular last time, I think I'm going to choose the circular ones this time. So let's take the angular buttons away. So K1 is always on the right, K2 is always on the left. So we just got to find the orientation that we want. Like so, and they click right into place. We're almost done, and then we get to test it. And there you go. There you have it. The Dawn Remap 2.0 controller modification kit with trigger stops. So you can see that if I pull the trigger here, it goes all the way to the bottom. If I flick it up, it's going to stop about halfway, giving me a quicker trigger pull in all sorts of things like shooters and things like that, and as well as remappable buttons on the back. So how do you do these remappable buttons? Well, let me synchronize my controller to a PlayStation and I'll show you how it works. So now let me show you how to remap your buttons. Because we put that capacitive touchpad inside the controller, all you have to do is hold your button where you had that pad. So I put it right down here in the middle, and you should see in about 5 seconds, the blue light turns on. Once that blue light is on, say I'm playing a game like Fortnite and I want to, I don't know, let's say reload a weapon. And I want this button here, the square button, and the K1 button, which is the right side button to do it. I'm going to press that button and hold until I see the flashes on the back. Okay, so once I see those flashes on the back, when I hold my finger down here and that light turns off, it is now set. So now when I go to play the game and say I want to play the game, and every time I pull that button, if I pull the trigger, it shoots my gun, and I press that button to reload, I could actually just press the button on the back to reload. So that's one of the cool features. If I want to disable that button, I can do the same thing again. I can just press and hold the button down here on the capacitive button, and it should turn the blue light on in about 5 seconds, like that. If I want to change it back, I could press the square button and hold again, and I should see a red button. The red lights flash a couple times, and it disables that. There is another way to disable. It's in the instructions. You can press a bunch of buttons on the face and stuff, and it will disable the controller from doing that. But that is it. Relatively simple speaking, the Ps4 Controller Remap 2.0 kit. Again, I butchered the name, but again, the 2.0 kit. Again, I will leave links in the description below for you guys. And that is it. That is how you install the Dawn Remap kit. It is definitely cool. I love how the ergonomics of the controller feel in my hands. My middle fingers just fit perfectly right on those buttons. And so when I pull the buttons and when I'm playing the game, it does exactly what I want. It's very responsive. No hesitations at all when using this controller. Well, guys, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope that step-by-step process helped you out. Again, though, keep in mind, remember the instructions are included with this kit, and they are very well detailed. So follow those instructions step by step if there's anything that I had to cut out of the video that didn't make it on the camera or my fat fingers were in the way. So I hope that doesn't bother you too much. Again, guys, thank you so much for stopping in and spending your time with me. I hope you found this video helpful. And if you did, consider subscribing and hit that notification button down below to let you know when we make new content. What is your favorite controller that you used to play with or still play with? And what are your favorite controller mods? Leave those comments down below. Or if there is a controller mod you'd like to see me attempt on the channel, if I've got time, leave it down below and maybe we could possibly get to that video. Guys, again, thank you so much for stopping in. As always, stay curious and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.